The hidden cost of your calling, how to evaluate the true cost of your job. You may have gone to school for a certain line of study. You may have wanted to do a certain job. And once you get the job, you may realize there are some hidden costs to your job. We're going to talk about that today from the perspective of mental health professionals, particularly clinical psychologists. So if you are at any job, it's important for you to evaluate the hidden costs of your job. So I'm excited to have another clinical psychologist here with us today. If you don't know me already, I am Dr. Kamani. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I've been licensed for over 20 years. I'm also a toxic job survivor, but more importantly, I'm a toxic job liberator for Black women. I'm also the co-founder with Marissa Price of the Job Liberation Virtual Summit for Black women, and the third annual Job Liberation Virtual Summit is coming up in May. So it starts May 1st. To get on the waiting list for that, the link is in the description section of this video. So I'm excited to have Dr. Denette King here with us today. So Dr. Denette King, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, I'm Dr. Denette King. I'm a pre-licensed clinical psychologist with a specialty or specialization in trauma, and I'm also the proud owner of Beauty for Ashes Sound Sanctuary, which is a somatic practice in which I do sound healing, breath work, and mindfulness meditation.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Let's just briefly tell how we met too, because let's just start there first. Okay. So we were at an event for a psychologist sister friend of ours, a Black woman. And so we're at the event, and I think Dr. Jeanette said, I know you. You look so familiar.
I
And I
did.
was like, I'm racking my brain, like, oh, do I know her? Like, I'm trying to figure out, do I know her? Do I know her? And she said, I know you. I know you from YouTube. And I was like, oh. And so she's like, yeah, I want you. I want you. And so we just started talking. And then she told me her name. And I remember like she had been watching me on YouTube and LinkedIn. So I remember her name. I remember her name. And so it's so funny. So I've been doing this for years, and I remember Danette's name clearly. And then we started talking about toxic jobs, and we started talking about how interesting it is in the mental health field that we experience such toxicity that many of you, if you're not in the mental health field, you would never know that we experience. So it's really ironic that people in the mental health field experience such toxicity in our training. And once we get out of training and we're working, we experience such toxicity. So we're in the helping, healing profession, yet we are often experiencing so much toxicity. So we're exposing all of that today in the hopes that that will help other Black women if you're in the healing professions or not. Okay. So we really want to give voice to our experiences, because when we give voice, we know we're not silent, and it um, help to liberate us to talk about our experiences. So, Dr. Jeanette, did you want to share anything about how we met?
Yes, actually, I attended some of your talks on LinkedIn at a time where I was struggling with working in a unsupportive work environment, which I felt was negatively impacting my mental health, my physical health, my relational health. We're going to get into it later, but my physical health as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you actually helped me make some really critical decisions to choose myself, which was very ironic because I love the work that I do. And
Mm-hmm.
so your space for Black women leaving toxic jobs helped me to put some things in perspective that I was struggling to put in perspective, because I'm usually always the only Black PhD in the spaces that I work in.
Mm-hmm.
So the community that you created, that I just kind of stumbled upon, helps me really make sense of some things, because this clinical journey is just very isolating, very marginalizing. And
Yes.
so it really normalized a lot of the things that I was feeling and helped me make some decisions that I think personally probably saved my life.
Oh, wow. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. And it was so like, I was like, wow, how did she know me? It was like a humbling experience. Like, when I go out in the world and people recognize me from social media, I'm always shocked that people know me. And then when they tell me they've been following me and that, the work has been helpful and impactful. It's very humbling for me, and it's also a reminder of the importance of doing this work. So thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. So let's talk about your story. So let's talk about you chose to become a clinical psychologist, okay? So when you thought about becoming a clinical psychologist, maybe what interested you to become a clinical psychologist? And as you've been on this path, what have you found in terms of your experience? Has it been affirming for you, or has it been instances of exploitation that you've experienced?
Mhm. I think early on, people around me knew that I had some type of gifting. Some like when I took personality tests and tests that basically measure your strengths and your challenges.
Mhm.
Interpersonal intelligence were always very, very high, like almost 100%. I always scored very high on those types of inventories from a child. So I think my first counseling job was I was in middle school. So I always had a love for helping people. I remember being in early elementary school and being that person that people talk to.
Mhm.
But because I always did that and it came very natural to me, I didn't really value that skill, and I actually was on a very different career path very early in life.
Mhm.
And then I think my high school, maybe my junior year in high school, um, the high school counselor said you would make a really good counselor, and I'm like, no, that's not really what I want to do. And my mom's like, no, I think she's right, and I'm like, no, that's not really what I want to do. I really want to do something else. But I, over time, really began to feel like called to this field. And because of gender role expectations, I got married very young. I ended up taking kind of like a compromise route to it. And I was a school based mental health counselor for many, many years, like a decade.
Mm.
So what happened was the kids have so many challenges. I was calling
Mhm.
a team working with the sheriffs. I was doing hospitalizations. There was a lot of suicidality, a lot of cutting, not injurious suicidal, non-suicidal self-injurious behaviors. And so I felt
Mhm.
I trained to be a counselor. I didn't, but these kids have so many issues. And so
Mhm.
that's when I ended up being like, okay, maybe ironically, this discomfort that I'm feeling, taking this alternative route, this kind of like shortcut to something that I probably am called to do. It got
Mhm.
so uncomfortable that I began to just kind of pray about it and felt called to clinical psychology, and just some of the things from my childhood came up, and so I just kind of surrendered. So for me, clinical psychology is a calling. It's not just a job, but as you kind of allude to, the challenge of entering the field, the very long process of becoming a clinical psychology. Our educational journey is 2 to 3 times longer than all the other mental health fields. The poverty, the relational isolation that you experience, the sleep deprivation, just the journey of it was
Mhm.
very confusing. The exploitation, the
Mhm.
sometimes in some cases the maltreatment and the misuse and abuse of power
Mhm.
when you're a student. All of those
Mhm.
things made that journey very complex for me. And on
Mhm.
top of that, I studied clinical psychology in seminary because I'm also a person of faith, and I wanted to integrate my faith and my spiritual practices into clinical work. And so that whole journey of the intersectionality of psychology, blackness, and faith has been very,
Mhm.
very interesting.
Hmm. Can we speak a little bit more about the exploitation? So, for those who are not familiar with the field of clinical psychology and the training, what about it seemed exploitative?
So for me, because my specialization was trauma, and I
Mhm.
also earned a certification in medical family therapy. So I've been in medical contexts. I've worked for a few hospitals. I right
Mhm.
now work at an outpatient site on a hospital campus, and so I'm always a part of a team or working very in close proximity to MDs, like psychiatrists, medical doctors. And as you know, unlike MFTs, unlike social work, psychology is an offshoot of psychiatry, and the early founders and fathers, and well, the fathers of psychology, early psychology, Sigmund Freud, and a lot of these individuals that we study and inform our clinical practice were MDs, and they were psychiatrists. And so our discipline is the only discipline of mental health that is still on this old medical model of training. And so instead of 2 years in like a master's 2 year program, our program is like 5 to 7 years. And then there's additional training after that. You have to do 1 or 2 years of fellowship. And so you're working with residents. And so the length of time, the having to pay exorbitant amounts of money to get the clinical training, I know people who are $500,000 in debt and are debt 300,000, 200,000 easily. And so it's because we're on this medical model, the amount of money that our education costs rivals that of med school. So, of medical students, but without the pay. So I began to work in these medical contexts. The medical residents that I was working with, some of them were getting paid, and then I was working for free for 6 years.
Whoa.
6 years working for free while paying tuition, and then while paying to be at clinical sites to get the training to complete the program, while doing research, unpaid, but helping professors get grants and things like that. And so there is this culture in the process of becoming a clinical psychology of really being free labor. And so because we have the skills, so by the time I'm a third, we pick up a master's in the process.
Right.
So half the program, we have the training, the 2 years of MFT or a social worker. Because of the way our profession is set up, we're still treated like students. And so it's nothing for you to work as, like, for example, right now, because I'm licensed and I'm talking about this because there's a lot of shame and controversy around licensure in our field after 6, 7, 8, 9 years of practice and still not being able to make money like a master's level clinician in another discipline, even though you're 3 to 4 times trained as them in terms of the length of your schooling. And so those are the things that make entering this field very challenging. As you know, we've talked about Black psychologists are only 4 to 6% of the field because most of us we can't afford to work for free for 6 years.
Right.
We can't afford it while paying tuition, while working as clinicians, while doing research, while defending your dissertation, don't be a woman with like additional responsibilities. They're giving responsibilities, domestic responsibilities, gender role responsibilities. Like most of us don't have the bandwidth or the community resources to even do this process.
Right.
And so there's a lot of, and then on top of that, after you graduate, as you know, I graduated with honors. I was Miss Speaker for my for our class. And then, but here I am still so exhausted years after graduating that I'm still trying to recoup money that was lost from being underpaid or unpaid for 6 or 7 years and basically thrust my family into poverty for me to just even enter into this field. And so people hear PhD or doctor and they assume when they hear doctor, there's images that come with that. But our field, we don't match those images. We have the status, the title, and the letters, but the process is so brutal, and the lack of income that we have access to for such a prolonged period of time to even enter into the field really, it takes us a while to get to the status financially of doctor even after graduating because of the additional barrier of fellowship and which is 1 or 2 years of making money. I remember being at a very prestigious site. My daughter worked at Burlington Coat Factory making the same amount of money as me hourly.
Wow.
I was a fully defended student. Defended.
That says a lot, right? That says a lot. And I just think too, well, several things I want to talk about. One, you talked about the barriers to Black people even getting into the field. So the financial cost, the barriers in terms of time, the amount of labor that it takes to get the degree, and all the other things we have to carry, but also the racism and sexism that we might experience in graduate school. That's a whole nother,
That's a whole
conversation.
nother episode. Yes.
Oh my gosh. The other thing that you talked about was even after we finish,
We're
there's
not done.
financial burden because you got these huge loans. And then when we get like our first jobs, these first jobs are not paying that much money. They really are not. And you still got to pay back the loan. And
Yes.
then the other part you talked about was the respect, right? So people assume that we're gonna veer a little bit and then we're gonna come back, okay? So people assume that once you get your degree, that you're gonna be treated in a certain way. Now, this was a wake up call to me, okay? So once I got the degree, the way I was treated was not by people who look like us. Okay, people who look like us in most cases, the vast majority of cases. Now I had some exceptions. The vast majority of people who look like us, like they were excited to see I had a doctorate, and they were insistent about calling me doctor, right? And I'm like, you don't need to. No, I'm going to call you doctor. Like you went through, you right, and like they were very insistent about. Like they were proud of me for getting a doctor, right? However, what I found when I went into other professional environments where there were people who were not like us, oftentimes there was this weird dynamic to acknowledge that I had a doctorate, particularly when I was one or maybe a few of the people there who had a doctorate. It was a weird dynamic, okay? It was almost in the sense of either I'm not going to acknowledge it at all, or I'm going to respond in a way to show that you're just like everybody, like you're just like us, right? You're just like, and not that you're going in acting like, oh, I'm better than everybody else, but there is a difference in terms of our training and experience. There is a difference. So that was my experience. I'm curious to hear from you. Did you have that experience also? Just this weird kind of response, like almost like a backlash, kind of like, like what, y- like disbelief that you have a PhD, and like kind of like who do you think you are? And because of that, I'm going to treat you in this way because I think that you think that you're better than me. So I'm going to kind of put you in your place. I'm not going to acknowledge that you have a doctorate. Did that happen to you in any way?
Absolutely. I have um, I've had experiences on hospital floors where I call patients and it's fine, and I let them know I'm going to come in. But then when I actually make it to the room, you can tell that they're shocked that I'm African
Mhm,
American.
mhm,
Had people confuse me with custodial staff despite me wearing a badge that clearly identifies who I am, of my
mhm.
title, my position. I've had people confuse me despite working with me on a regular basis with some other person that they just maybe like a itinerant or a traveling social worker where they've been
Mhm.
working with me for 5 months, and the social worker maybe came in maybe 3 weeks ago, and then all of a sudden now because there's a second black person in the unit, they don't
Wow.
know which one is which.
Mm.
You wore blue that day, she wore blue this day, now they're confused. Because of the settings that I've been in, I work with a lot of social workers, and I do sometimes run into people, particularly males, depending on their culture.
Mhm.
There can be some interesting racial and gender dynamics because, and actually, it's not only males. It will be people who come from different backgrounds. I'll just say that because
Mhm. Mhm.
I've also had it for females as well. But I've had. I'm always the black PhD. Like I've never been in all 8 years of my clinical experience, I've never had the privilege of working with another black PhD on the staff that I've been at. And the one time that I did, they are a PhD, but they were so high up. They were like an admin. They weren't like a
Mm.
technician like me. So there was
Mhm.
still like that difference.
Mhm.
I have definitely experienced people um, trying to kind of put me in my place, or almost like how dare I share my clinical expertise, which might be a little more extensive than theirs because I've had maybe 3 times of training as them because of the program, and it has become like an interpersonal issue. I have had people that look like me also take issue with them. We don't talk a lot about it, and I think in our culture. But I also had very interesting dynamics with men in my family. I come from a line of pastors, and so studying psychology, being a PhD, and also getting a theological degree at the same time rubbed up against some of the men in my family in ways that brought up some issues for them where it was a lot. And I had to really have some really hard conversations with around gender role expectations and around fragility.
That's fascinating. That is fascinating. I've never, and again, I was telling you off camera that the beauty of these conversations of me interviewing Black women is that new information comes up every time I interview a different Black woman. So even if there might be some similarities, we all have complex histories. So I just appreciate having these conversations and our willingness to share because other Black women might relate on some level. So, Dr. Danette, what about, given that we're talking about issues of intersectionality, right? So, in terms of thinking about when people see us, they see us as a Black woman, okay? And they don't think about, oh, she's got, oh, this training and she's got a PhD. They see us as a Black woman and they have these stereotypes and these perceptions. And we know in any field that we're in or any environment that we're in, there's white supremacy. And we know there's a social hierarchy in these environments that we're in also. So I'm wondering, in the environments in which you were trained or the environments that you worked in, have there been times where other people's behavior was seen a certain way, but then your behavior may have been viewed in a different way, right? So you may have been seen as, oh, Dr. Jeanette, she did this or that's unprofessional. But other people may have done the same exact thing and that behavior was not labeled in that way.
I'll be honest, Dr. Kamani, I've been really, really blessed. I really
Mhm,
have really been blessed despite the hardships that I've experienced
mhm,
and in this field in my training and the intersectionality that I've had to navigate.
mhm,
God has really blessed me with a lot of favors. So even when I have challenging situations in the workplace, God has always sent me like some type of advocate or some type of ally. And
mm,
so I want to give a shout out to those who have like partnered with me and supported me in those spaces. And so I really have been very fortunate where I haven't had a lot of those experiences, but I will say I think also that I have a lot of, not anymore, but because I was black, or because I was the only black person in the field, I worked extremely hard to exhaustion and to illness
mm,
to try to transcend these biases and these issues. So I developed I came in with perfectionistic tendencies anyway. And then this field, because of the pressure to be better, to transcend these biases, that people might have about me and just not caring about the letters behind my name or my level of training or expertise and just judging me based on how I present.
mhm,
I worked really, really hard
mm,
to my own deficit
mm,
to perform. And so,
mm,
but what I will say is when I do assert myself
mhm,
and advocate for myself, and or advocate mainly advocate for myself. I've had to advocate for patients But it's really made me, when I advocate for myself and set a boundary, sometimes I think the one area where I do think I'm treated differently, because, and it has to do with bias and really like racial issues. I
Mhm.
think when I assert myself and I'm labeled as angry when I'm just being assertive.
Uh-huh.
To the angry black woman trope, and I'm like, no, I'm
Yeah.
very professional. My tone. I'm a clinical psychologist. Like, I'm very aware of tone and
Mhm.
things like that.
Mhm.
Just you just are not wanting me to speak up for myself.
Right.
You have
Right.
a problem with me being confident and professional and able to intelligently articulate the issues that I'm having in this moment, and you're feeling threatened and your unchecked biases are coming out in this moment. I have
Right.
I have had that several times happen.
Mhm. And I feel like it's in some way that's a silencing technique because, as Black women, we know that people view us as the angry Black woman. And so we're very cognizant of that. And so many times when we're in the work environment, we're constantly evaluating our tone, even like the tone of our emails, right? So constantly rechecking, checking, rechecking before we send the email. It's exhausting. Thinking about how to say this, how am I going to say this? Okay, wait a minute. How to interact with this person? Exhausting. And so,
Exhausting.
and
Exhausting.
so when people say this, I'm like, oh my God, do you know how much I had to go through to even say something to you? Like I went through like mental gymnastics to even send this email, have this conversation, do all these different things. So when people say this to us, it's like, what? Like, okay. But the thing about it too is that you held your own and being able to assert yourself. So even if that didn't happen to you in terms of people maybe saying you were unprofessional, I'm just wondering, had you observed situations in which some people were labeled unprofessional in certain environments? Had you observed that, and then certain other people were not?
Yes, just, I mean, yeah, of course. Yes, I've known people to have less grace extended to them in terms
Mhm.
of work standards. I've observed people who look like me have higher levels of monitoring in terms of like their attire, their hair, their
Mhm.
style, with their professionalism being questioned. For the longest time, I didn't even want to lock my hair
Mm.
because, and this is why I'm locked, because the work that I've been doing in myself, internally, as a black professional in the field, it
Mhm.
took me years to lock
Mhm.
because of these types of dynamics.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
Now I've done enough work therapeutically and spiritually, to not really care and to show up as my authentic self. But it's
Mhm.
because of me witnessing these type of microaggressions and micro inequities in the workplace that
Mhm.
it informed how I came and showed up and performed and things. But definitely I have seen them, definitely.
Right, right. So we talked about some of the financial costs, right? There's another, when we think about like becoming a psychologist, there's another gatekeeping issue in terms of becoming a psychologist, and that is the EPPP. So the EPPP, for those of you who don't know, that is the exam. That's one of the exams that you have to take to become a licensed psychologist. And the EPPP is this huge exam, and it's everyone within the country has to take it to become licensed. So let's talk about the EPPP and in ways that it seems to be a way to gatekeep.
Mhm. Well, as people probably will realize, I said, introduced myself as a pre-licensed like clinical psychologist because that's one of the things that our board is really clear about. And there's a lot of, despite your level of expertise, how long you've been practicing, because I'm like, if we weren't competent, why are you guys letting us practice on all these people, right?
Uh-huh.
So, but I have not had the energy to even study for this exam because I'm exhausted. I'm just
Mhm.
exhausted from
Mhm.
my doctoral journey. And then I'm a person that graduated during a pandemic. That's a whole nother discussion.
Mm.
Being a person who was in graduate school in the mental health profession during a pandemic, many of us have our own trauma by, sitting with people amidst global trauma, national,
Mhm.
collective trauma that many of us
Mhm.
experience in this country.
Mhm.
Triple P is problematic on so many levels. Not only is it extremely expensive, so if people don't know, and I'm so glad we're talking about this because I'm like, why do people? Our graduate program didn't talk about this in
Mhm.
terms of real reality. So the EPPP is massive. There's like so many domains. How many domains would you guess, Dr. Kamani? Like
I've tuned it out. I blocked it out now.
it's over 15 domains, and within each domain, there's many domains.
Hmm.
And the test is extremely expensive. It's like almost 800, it's like 700 something per test. Then per time that you take it, and then in order to take it, you have to apply with the board. Psychology, and California's board is extremely difficult.
It
Very,
is.
it's very difficult.
Mhm.
And that's like about 250 or so, 235 to 200, 200 something to apply for that to even be able to take the test. And
Mhm.
$700 to take the test. The test is really about test taking strategies and for standardized test taking more than it is actually about a test or assessment of your actual clinical skills.
Mhm.
Most people who take the test, and then there's part one, and then there's part two. There is
Mhm.
the general clinical part that has a legal component to it, and
Mhm.
then, as if you weren't paying enough, they make you take a second test where it's all legal,
Mhm. Mhm.
examination about law, general law, and then law within your particular state. And so
Mhm.
thousands and thousands of dollars, and then the test prep programs are extremely expensive,
Yes, they are.
but you need them because
Yeah,
you need to know how to study. Because why? Because our graduate programs do not prepare us for these tests.
they do not.
For
They do not.
6 years, you're learning this information, and most of them do not teach the curriculum so that we come out well prepared for these tests.
Mhm.
The variety of industrial psychology that you might have in one program varies from industrial or IO in another program. So it's not really every clinical psych program is different, and they focus on different things. And so
Mhm.
uh, the best way I can describe it is I had a dear friend
Mhm.
who took the test many, many, many times. And the
Mhm.
last time she took it, she passed by like 2 points.
Wow.
She remembered that she was able to get this question correct about the level of noise of medical machinery.
What?
And she was like, I don't know if this was an experimental question or not, but I can't help but to think that if it was an actual test question that was like not an experimental test question, and it was
Mhm.
a test question that went towards my actual score, that if I
Mhm.
had not remembered this quirky question about an MRI machine and versus another as CAT scan versus whatever, which has nothing to do
Mhm.
with most of the work that we do, that I would have failed this test yet another.
Wow. Wow.
And
And
so
it's so deflating, right?
it's
You've gone through
so
all this graduate school, all this studying. Because I remember I took like months. I was in a test prep program. I mean, it's extensive, extensive.
and
Yeah.
there's so many people, unfortunately, that go through the whole process of grad school, get in debt, and this issue of the EPPP is so challenging that
Mhm.
some people just never reach licensure, and then
Yeah.
you're just kind of this like abyss of like
Yeah.
you can't really do anything. You're not licensed, so there's limitations. And so you have all this debt, and then you can't
Mhm.
work anywhere. And so it's kind of like you're just stuck.
It's almost like sharecropping almost. You know what I'm saying? Like you got to work under somebody else and then you get little bit of money and then after a certain amount of time then you can't work. It's all these different ways you got to try to navigate, but it's really uh really makes you question yourself. You know that you go through all of this and then with the final step you're like what happened? What happened?
It's,
Yeah.
it's a test that favors people who have additional time and money to
Mhm.
not work
Mhm.
full time
Mhm.
after years of not working full time, possibly
Mhm.
to, during their graduate studies, and who can afford to study,
Mm-hmm.
don't need to, that have time, that after you've already invested over a half a decade, to learning your craft,
Mm-hmm.
classroom and
Mm-hmm.
in the field,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you
It's
know.
really sobering. I mean, because I remember when I graduated, I was like, wait a minute. Like when you get that loan, because first you have deferment, right? A little bit. When you get that loan statement about how much you owe, you're like, wait a minute, I could have been in the South and I could have bought a house with this loan payment. That's the first thing. The second thing is I started thinking about, oh my, now I got to study for a test, two tests. Like what? Now I got to do that. And then when you get in the field, I feel that also. So graduate school does not prepare you for what happens after you graduate. And I wish somebody would have tapped me on the shoulder and told me about what would happen or what I might encounter when I went into the field. No one told me that either. I wish somebody would have told me that. So as you're thinking about the EPPP and all that, and we think about these are all the things we're doing to help other people. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then after you get licensed, then you got to continue to take classes, and so
Correct.
it's kind of it never ends. It never ends.
Mhm.
So, Danette, you mentioned this earlier about you were at this job. You made reference to a job where there was some perfectionism going on, and it started impacting you at a level, right? So this is after you graduated. You had this job. Okay, so that was a job where you had to kind of step away for a moment. Okay, do you mind if we talk a little bit more about that job? Because I think a lot of Black women push ourselves to the point where we get really sick on some level and we have to step away, but not because we want to, but because we have to, because our body gives out or something happens to us. So, can you tell us like an overview of what was the work you were doing? What was contributing to the stress you were experiencing? And then what ended up happening that you had to kind of step away?
So I think my crash was an effect to years of living chronically stressed.
Hmm.
So because I was already not feeling well my final year of grad school, because that was the year. So for me to finish, I had to choose, because of the pandemic, I had to choose between leaving my family, including a 5-year-old baby, in order to finish my internship somewhere during the
Mm.
pandemic. And because all the schools closed, I had to leave 3 children at home.
Oh.
I had, it was either that or I wouldn't graduate. And
Mm.
so the stress of being a caregiver, a mom,
Mm.
doctoral journey with, moving with curfews and tanks on the ground, and
Oh. Ooh.
moving away and not seeing another Black person for a whole year unless my family visited me, and just feeling the fear. I think I want to talk about that, because I think a lot of times people forget that before we were psychologists and practitioners, we're people. So before I am a psychologist, I'm a Black woman who's a
Mhm.
mother who lives in this country with
Mhm.
Black
Mhm.
children. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? And so I'm not immune to the stressors
Mhm.
of everyone else.
Mhm.
I was just pushing through so I could graduate.
Mm.
So that pushing through the stress of all that, I had to fly
Mhm.
back and forth every 3 weeks to just spend 30 hours with my 5-year-old.
Wow.
I had a son who was a senior in high school, who I had to like make sure he was well too,
Mm.
because all the athletics and things were shut down for him. So his senior year was very different. I had a daughter who's a freshman year in college, who was excited about college, and halfway through her college year, freshman year, she had to come home because of the pandemic. So I was
Mhm.
dealing with life. And so, but I think the part that was difficult in during this time period was the power differentials, and the not having the same privileges as people who were supervisors and well-seasoned clinical psychologists who I was working for,
Mhm.
and they could have their children in my clinical supervision, but I had to leave my children 600 miles away.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
these disparities,
Mhm.
and I was having to kind of like live with and process
Mhm.
and tolerate without any power because you don't have power. Like
Mhm.
a student, you have no power. We have no union. We have
Mhm.
no representation. We have the board where we can consult with, but pretty much a graduate institution
Mhm.
is, and depending on your relationship with them. And I did have a good relationship with my graduate institution, but some of us do not, and it still doesn't. They still have these political relationships with your sites, and they, what I mean, because they want to send students there in the future after you. So just the cumulative effect of that, and then going to another place where it was the second placement that I had, where basically the people I was working for, they were burnt out. They were
Mm.
burnt out. They were
Mhm.
tired, just like everybody else.
Mhm.
And some of them did not navigate their own burnout well. And then it really put students like me who were trying to finish this long process in our fellowships or wherever, it put us in a difficult situation of having to silently do work without sometimes in some cases proper amount of support, or
Mm.
our supervisors not being as well as they could have because they were also in a pandemic. They were also dealing with the stress of that was going on in the nation at the time. And
Mhm.
so the effects of that, plus the poverty that I was living in, it was just too much. And the work I was doing was very serious work.
Mhm.
I put, we're putting my LinkedIn in, so I don't want people to be able to like, I don't want to like call out any institutions in general, specifically. But I will say, doing all of that and then not being able to walk across the stage for my own graduation, not having joy of my children seeing me, in my graduation ceremony in person, and so was my the end of my 6 7 year journey in grad school was very anticlimactic. It was just very not a big deal because of the pandemic. So it's like I did
Mhm.
all the bedtimes. I missed bedtime stories, homework hours, games, plays, and things that I did, that I missed, and hanging out
Mhm.
with friends and the sacrifices. Then to just not even be able to have a regular ceremony, and then to go to yet another placement where people um, were not that I worked with weren't their best because
Mhm.
they weren't necessarily handling their own mental health care, physical health, spiritual health, or whatever, in
Mhm.
a way that considered that they were working with other people and they were over students, and that we needed them to be well
Mhm.
because their level of support impacted us as we were finishing up our journey as students.
Right. So you
So
were expressing high stress, and then you were like spent. So you're like taking care of that, then you're trying to run home, you're thinking about your kids. So you're kind of worn down.
with minimal support and no avenue to address the minimal support because of the power differentials.
Mm.
And so it
Mm.
was a culture where you just had to bear through it.
Mm-hmm.
It may have looked like people not showing up to your supervisions,
Stop it. The supervisor not showing up for your supervisions.
not showing up for work.
Mm. Okay.
Who are you going to tell?
Wow.
Who are you going
Okay.
to tell? There is
Mm.
no internal body in training sites for students to go to. There was no accountability.
Wow. That's terrible. That's terrible. And so, can you share with us how did this cumulative stress, how did that impact you? How did that show up for you?
That on top of having a few family members that were impacted by COVID in very
Mhm.
profound ways.
Mhm.
One day I got out of bed and I couldn't walk.
When you were away,
No, this is when I came back
or
down.
when you came back home? Okay. Okay.
I couldn't walk.
Oh,
My
wow.
my body just gave out on me. And so this is the part that's interesting, that it like really intersects with another dynamic that Black women um, have, is dismissive medical practices in medical, context. And so here I am providing excellent care where I was receiving inferior care as a patient. And so I kept telling my medical team, I don't feel well. I think something's going on. And basically I had something going on medically and it wasn't being treated because it kept dismissing me. So here I am really ill, and then going to work and providing excellent care for my patients, and then being under supported because of supervisor burnout and whatever supervisors, not all supervisors, let me be clear, this is not all supervisors, but a significant enough of them where it was impactful across multiple settings. I want to say that across multiple contexts, because I had many rotations in my final years of training. And I just got really sick because I wasn't getting the medical care that I really needed. And so the effect of being undertreated or untreated as a patient, and then the stress of work, and then the stress of home, and like I said, the isolation, not being able to talk to my family, they don't understand. Most of my family, they don't even go to therapy, so my family and my close loved ones in my personal life didn't understand my journey at all. So just the lack of support, and then not feeling well. And at some point, my body just gave up. So because of that, I had to step down, and I didn't work for a whole year.
Wow.
It took my medical team it took them 4 years.
What?
4 years. I literally just feel better.
Wow.
Since
So
the pandemic.
that's crazy. So, Dr. Annette, so what was it like for you as a mother to not be able to walk? And what was your recovery
It
to
was
be able to start walking again?
it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. I couldn't fix my son a sandwich. I couldn't fix myself a sandwich. I I grew depressed because I just, you are used to doing and serving, and then it's so humbling.
Yeah.
So I had to really lean into my spiritual practices. That's all I had because my medical team wasn't helping me, and my clinical placement didn't really care. I couldn't go to
Mm,
work, so I was of no use to them.
mm.
And
Did you
so
have supports, Dr. Jeanette? Who helped you during this time?
God,
I mean, did you have any adults or other adults around to help you with
it
the
just
kids or?
yeah, I had some help with the kids, but like for me, they didn't. It was just they didn't know how to help.
Mm,
They didn't have the They didn't know what to do for me. They're not medical doctors. They're not. You know what I mean? They didn't
mm,
know. So this is where like sometimes you can kind of feel the educational divide also in your family. You know what I'm saying?
mhm,
Like when you have like all these degrees, and then you come from a family where maybe most people do not.
mhm,
So it's just education causes you to think differently. And I'm not saying, I know some very educated people who are not as intelligent as you would think, and I know some people who have no degrees that are very
mhm,
intelligent. So I'm not really talking about the degree
mhm,
making a person, but I'm talking about when you have this level of training, the isolation that happens, and just how people, like how you become the person everyone calls, when, for free therapy, when there's any kind of mental health issue at your church and your family, you know
mhm,
what I'm saying? So I kind of was also in that kind of dynamic as well, where people
mhm,
just didn't know what to do because I had been
mhm,
the strong one that helped so many people for so long. And so when I
mhm,
crashed, people kind of like didn't know what to do.
mm,
So I just had to rest. I had to rest. I had to rest, and I had to pray.
hmm,
And I eventually, um, how did I even eventually, honestly, is how I came into sound healing, which is why I had my sound bath business.
mhm,
And I through the sound healing, I began to understand the body mind soul connection a bit more, and so that began me on this journey of somatic practices and just understanding like the impact of stress and the impact of having a dysregulated nervous system, Uh,
Mhm.
I'm a member of Girl Track, so I walk. And ironically, one of the members of Girl Track was she had some similar. She had the founders had a similar situation, not about walking, but they didn't feel well, and so then
Mhm.
they got diagnosed, and then it kind of helped me listen to them like, hey, I'm kind of feeling like that, and so then I talked to my doctor and advocated, and
Mhm.
and ended up finding an endocrinologist that would help me. And then that was a journey where one thing in my labs that they had overlooked for years was enable them to kind of figure out my diagnosis. And it wasn't the sum total what was wrong with me, but it was the
Mhm.
beginning of recovery. And so
Okay.
that through rest, I'm asking questions because of being in Black communities where women were talking about health, knowing the questions to ask,
Mhm.
and then holistic practices, sound healing, also expanded to acupuncture with a Chinese medicine doctor, and then also incorporating walking, eliminating stress out of my life, and just the cumulative effort of all of that together. After a year, I finally was better. I
Wow.
was not 100% because there was actually a secondary diagnosis that nobody missed, and they kept dismissing. So I had to fire my entire medical team last year,
Mm.
after 4 years of suffering and not feeling well. And you know what I did? I chat GBT'd it, and I use AI. I use AI, and
What?
I literally put everything that was going on with me, and it gave me a plan, and it told me what to do, what type of doctor I needed, a primary physician, and I just followed it to the T. And when I tell you, my new team, within 7 minutes, my new doctor was like, "This is what's wrong with you." And it
Ah.
was 3 or 4 years of suffering. All I could do was break down and cry.
Wow. Wow. Now that's the testimony. So what I heard you say, Dr. Neff, was you were wiped out. Like you could not walk. You had family support to help you with the kids and to help you with kind of day to day stuff. And then a lot of prayer, a lot of rest. But then you also had holistic ways of, treatment. So you had acupuncture. You had what other kind of things were you leaning into?
I didn't mention I've been doing yoga for 10
Okay.
years. Yoga, where
Okay.
a teacher that knows me well, walking with Girl Trek,
Mm-hmm.
hydration, prayer,
Mm-hmm.
acupuncture,
Mm-hmm.
and detoxing my life. I had to detox my life. I had to put some boundaries with some relationships with family and friends that were making me sick.
Oh, okay. That's a hot spot. Okay. I can imagine somebody watching this going, ouch, right now. Okay. So, can you elaborate on what that means to detox from some of your relationships? What did that look like? What does that mean?
It meant really paying attention to my body and getting reconnected to myself because of the dehumanization of Black and brown bodies in this country. A lot of us live very disconnected, and we can go heady and
Mhm.
not listen to when we have that gut feeling like, don't go on that date, or
Mhm.
don't answer the phone,
Mhm.
or you're on the phone, okay, like you start your chest starts tightening up, your stomach starts kind of hurting and getting uncomfortable, your back starts tensing. Well, I used to push through those things. I used to suppress those bodily signals,
Mhm. Mhm.
and just to be available for people.
Mhm.
And so in this journey, because I was so ill and
Mhm.
so unable to do anything, that I had
Mhm.
to prioritize myself for the first time.
Mm. Okay.
So I began to listen to those signals, and
Mhm.
anyone that routinely dysregulated my nervous system, those are the people I had to make some choices about. And I mean anyone and everyone.
So, family, friends.
Spouses.
Ooh, ooh. Okay, okay. No joke. No joke. Okay, okay. Is that something that you still practice in your life?
Yes, I don't want to get sick again.
Okay, okay.
And
So
it's
the
peaceful. I'm like, it's peaceful.
okay, so the importance of maintaining boundaries, detoxifying, right? And so can you tell us more about how you got into somatic healing? Because I want people to hear this journey that you've had because it sounds like this world was kind of opened up to you as a result of a very stressful, painful experience. Something new was revealed, right? So when I think about like post traumatic um,
Right.
experiences that we have, right? Post traumatic growth. So you went through trauma, but as a result of this, you became a different, evolved person to the point where you're supporting healing on a higher level, a higher frequency, right? And you're helping in terms of vibration. So, can you talk about how did you learn about somatic healing and talk about what is somatic healing too?
Mhm. Somatic healing is basically it's an integrative way of understanding wellness. And so it's not just eating, your diet. It's just being mindful of your entire body and
Mhm.
just being mindful of ways to care for yourself. So for me, the crux of it is based on polyvagal theory of your nervous system, because dysregulated nervous systems, which are triggered by fight, flight, freeze, threat responses,
Mhm.
are, Dr. Nadine Burke, God bless her, the former
Mhm.
Surgeon General of
I
California, is
know.
on
Mhm.
this tour talking about this,
Mhm.
based on a Kaiser Permanente and CDC study that they did, where they basically found a correlation between early childhood experiences and medical diagnoses, from cardiovascular disease, diabetes, strokes, cancer, addictions, depression, anxiety. And so somatic practices basically help you attune and care for your whole self,
Mhm.
and listening and attuning to the wisdom of your body and noticing when you need to make adjustments. And
Mhm.
so for me, because I graduated from Fuller Theological Seminary, and so we did have a class the first semester where we had to have some type of mindfulness. Well, we didn't call it mindfulness. It was a spiritual practice. It was a spiritual practice class. And so for me, my spiritual practice that I chose at the beginning of my doctoral studies was mindfulness walks,
Mhm.
meditational walks. And so the meditational walks helped me to kind of understand the power of exercise and movement and
Mhm.
somatic practices. And so then, because I already was a member of Black Girls Run and Girl Trek, I had an appreciation for the power of movement and the power of, just the power of movement. And so,
Okay.
and then what happened was my dissertation was about runners, and elite athletes. My dissertation was perfectionism and spiritual development within elite athletic context. And so, in studying the outcomes of running, um, the intersectionality of spirituality and actually running and purpose, like running for a higher calling, helps
Mhm.
me to understand even more so through the study, through my dissertation work, about the benefits of exercising for with spiritual practices integrated into that, whether it be running for like a marathon to raise water in some type of village in Africa, or running for a good cause, or just running to connect with your body, running to connect with nature, being in
Mhm.
nature, walking. And so that was like my introduction. So then I don't even know, I got on Meetup, which is an app, and I just was like, let me try yoga. And so I started yoga.
Mhm.
I live near Long Beach, and so we have yoga every day of the week almost at the beach. And so I joined that community, and it was just amazing. And to this day, I
Mhm.
still practice with those individuals. And so then it's just expanded to sound healing, and
Mhm.
it just expanded because it's just been very helpful for me.
Okay. So you and I have had some rich conversations, and I want to have just a moment to talk about this here. Okay. So there's often a perception within our community about yoga, about sound healing, and that if someone's Christian, that those behaviors are not consistent with being Christian. Can you speak to that?
Mhm. Yes, I can speak about sound healing because I'm not certified in yoga, but I will say what I will say about yoga, my experience with yoga, is that there's different rooted in the practices. You have some yoga that's just pure movement, where it's just very American, like McDonald's. What made me feel comfortable and open to my own practice was my yoga instructor, who was raised as a Christian and then has walked away from that practice and is now more of a yogi. She's like, she goes to India, like she's a serious yogi.
Mm.
She was the most Christ-like person I had ever met.
Mm.
I grew up in church, and she does this. She doesn't worry about money. She walks by faith. She doesn't ask for fees for her classes. There was like a freedom and a liberty and a beauty to how she just lived her life that
Mhm.
really seemed to embody what I heard on Sunday mornings about what living in faith and walking in faith looked like. And it just made me curious.
Uh-huh.
And so then it made me open to her practices. And now we are friends now, and we have different spiritual beliefs. But the thing about me and studying, I studied Buddhism in seminary, I studied Islam in seminary, and it was those types of classes that actually made my faith in my personal belief system deeper.
Mhm.
So I have an openness about me that I feel like allows me to be in spaces and to still know that I know what I believe and who I believe in. So I don't have this fear, this fear about
Mhm.
around different people. I'm an international travel, I'm a traveler, so that comes with hospitality when you're meeting people from different cultures. Um,
Mhm.
sound healing is just science. Like ultrasounds are, we kill cancer cells with sound, and so I think people think of sound and they think ooh, like spooky and things like that. But if you really look at it from a scientific perspective and you see the power of sound, it's purely science. And so I think people are afraid out of lack of knowledge and exposure. And they have these very superficial understandings, if they have an understanding of it at all, about things, and it creates fear. Just like there are people who want to debate me about Christianity and talk about, it's the slave trade, religion, things like that. And my thing would be like, I don't argue with people. I'm not into apologetics. I don't argue with people who've never read the Bible.
Mm.
Like, I'm like, okay, so have you read the Bible?
Mm.
Okay, so what are we arguing based on? And so I
Mhm.
feel like when it comes to a lot of these practices, people have these ideas, but they
Mhm.
never really looked into it and had very intelligent conversations and been open and asked questions about
Mhm.
any of these practices. And they just hear these things and have these assumptions based on something they saw, something they heard, something, a feeling, but I find that it's really based on research and knowledge.
Mm. And what is the science of sound bowl healing?
Sound bowl healing has to do with frequencies, and every frequency resonates with a different part of your body, and so it's in hertz. And so the idea is, when we getting back to the fight, flight, freeze threat response, which is the sympathetic nervous system, a part of the autonomic nervous system, where there is another part of that nervous system, which is called the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest part of the nervous system. And so sound bowls stimulate the parasympathetic nervous systems. So feel good neurotransmitters are transmitted, and the body and the organs and the systems begin to work like they should to get us to shift us from the threat state, which has to do with cortisol and all these different neurotransmitters. Your digestion slows down, blood rushes to the extremities. All these bodily things happen in order to prepare us for survival, fight, flight, or freezing. And so
Mhm.
the sound bowls stimulate the complementary part of the nervous system that is tied to the feel good neurotransmitters, the dopamine, the serotonin, and things like that, that allows the body to return to its normal state of homeostasis and peace, better digestion, immune functioning, improved, sleep is improved, and all these other things that allow us to stay healthy. And
Hmm.
so we know that inflammation is tied to a lot of diseases. And so it basically, the benefits are numerous for sound healing, but it mainly stimulates the nervous system to allow our immune system to function as it should, and which fights inflammation, which makes us less prone to disease and illness and stress and anxiety and depression and poor sleep habits and all, and so on and so forth.
Okay. So it's interesting. So you're a you work in terms of mental, but then you also look in terms of wellness with sound bowl healing. So you also are part of a community of sound bowl healers. Is
I
that
am.
correct?
I am. Shout out to Bloom Healers. And so it's well, it's not all black, but it's a BIPOC sound healing group, and we're all through California, Northern and Southern California. And we do events, and we come together as a collective, and then and do community sound baths. But most of us have our own practices, and our whole mission is to make these types of practices, which can be in certain communities very, very expensive and inaccessible, to
Mhm.
make it accessible to those who normally would not have access or even know about these types of practices and the benefits of them.
Okay. So share about your service and how people can access the service that you offer with sound bowl healing, please.
Okay. Well, if you're interested in learning more about sound healing just as a science, you can go to my website. It's Beauty for Ashes Sound Sanctuary, and I have a whole page about what it is, the science behind it. I have a page that talks about the intersectionality of faith and Christianity, in particular, and sound healing. Is this witchcraft? What is this? What are the origins of this? And so that's on my page. You can also find me at Beauty for Ashes on Facebook, and you can find me Beauty for with the number four Ashes Sound Sanctuary on Instagram. And I think you're going to put all of that in the chat for people to also have access to.
Yep. So I have it in the chat. I'm putting on the screen as well. And I'll also put it in the description section of the YouTube video. I'll upload the link. And I also want to tell everyone that actually Dr. Denette did a sound bowl healing that I actually videotaped when I first met her. And that's actually on my YouTube channel. And I just had my phone, I just recorded her. And Dr. Net was amazed about how many people watched the video. And it was just, people just kept watching, watching, watching. And tell us why what was so why were you so amazed that so many people were watching that, Dr. Jeanette?
Because I find that there's a lot of fear and just hesitance about the space. But then I think because you have done such an amazing job, and I just want to thank you for creating this space, Dr. Kamani, for Black women to have hard conversations, to experience safety when we have these hard conversations, and to even to explore. And so by you posting that sound bath in a safe space where people already knew you and there was relationship, it opened, I think it allowed people who normally probably would not come to a studio or sit for sound bath to experience it because they have a relationship with you and your community.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love that. I love that. So again, I have all of Dr. Jeanette's information. It's going to be in the chat, and it'll also be in the description section of the video. So we also talked before, also, I'm going to go back a little bit and then I'm start reading community chat about ways that psychologists are seen in relation to other professions, right? Can you speak to that, like medical doctors and just other professions? So, what's your perspective on that, Dr. Jeanette?
Dr. Kamani, you want to get me in trouble.
Absolutely not.
Okay. So, like we kind of talked about before, we are the only mental health profession that is still on the medical school training model in terms of timeline and rigor and expense and things like that. And so, what I find is there, and I won't get into the too much into the history, but basically at the world wars, they psychology was born as an offshoot of psychiatry, because they figured out that giving people prescriptions was not enough, that people needed like care in between. And so the profession of psychology was born out of psychiatry. And so because of that, I find that this is not research, this is just my personal experience, and this is something I talk a lot about with my colleagues, but I find sometimes we're treated as like step MDs or step psychiatrists, like the stepchildren of medicine. It's like, oh, well, you're not really a doctor because you're not an MD or you're not a psychiatrist. And so there's like this pecking order, particularly in medical context. And even though we have gone to school for just as long and have specializations just like them, because they are in the profession that I think is the original profession out of which our profession was born, there's like a pecking order. And then you have social workers and things like that, and who are, not in school as long. So that creates a dynamic. And so I find that as psychologists, we're more trained than a lot of other professions, but then we're also not as respected as like MDs. And so we're in this like strange position a lot of times, particularly when you work as a part of a medical team and people kind of don't quite know what to do with you, understand what you do. And so there can be a lot of like advocacy work that needs to be done for yourself. So, as you're trying to become more integrated in multidisciplinary settings.
Okay, so you made reference to there might be some dynamics that happens with other mental health professionals too. Can you speak a little bit more on that?
Well, I will say that well, as you know, right now, and I don't know all the reasons why, but there's a shortage of psychologists. There's a shortage of psychiatrists right now, nationally.
And
it's
how expensive it is, that makes sense.
been going on for years, a major shortage. And so what's happening is, some of the reasons for the shortage is because there's not enough of us, because it's so hard to get into our field.
Right.
Right. And so more people are talking about mental health, more people are open to mental health. Specifically, I noticed since the pandemic, but there's just not enough providers, right? And we can see that. Like, we have family members who, have to wait 6 months to see somebody. I told you my story in terms of medical care, because there's also a shortage of, some disciplines in medicine as well. But and so what's happening is, because there's a shortage, I find of our discipline, but the work is still there. And so there's like this space that where needs need to be addressed. And so other disciplines are filling in those needs, but we do very different things. Like psychologists are the only ones that can do assessments, assessments to determine personality disorders, assessments to determine autism, neurodevelopmental disorders. That's not social workers. Hello, it's us. Right. And so there's a shortage. And because I work in pediatric care, we're really seeing this, because we're seeing a rise in the need to assess kids for autism and things like that. The regional centers are short and things like that. So providers who can do these assessments, school psychologists are in schools, or there's a shortage of them. They're the people who are instrumental, with I'm not diagnosing
IEPs and
eligibility for IEP and 504 plans, right? Assessment is hard work, and the insurance companies have made some changes where the payback, the rate of pay for psychological assessments is kind of not worth it as well. So a lot of people who have these skills are private pay only, and so that's a whole thing. And so where there's money to be made, you have scarcity and mentality, and you have demand and all this kind of stuff. So you have other disciplines vying for these positions, even though their training is not necessarily historically preparing them for these type of roles in the clinical setting. And so, like, I had a friend the other day say that she's been looking for a master's level, a clinician for, a family member, and there's only master's level clinicians that are available, but the rate that they're charging are doctoral rates. But they can, because there's not enough of us. People need the services. And so they can price gouge.
Mm.
But because, we know what the rates are
Right.
across
Right.
the different plans, but it's leaving people who are looking for services, for some people paying really high rates for people whose training doesn't necessarily justify paying these rates. But
Mm.
what you're going to do, you need a provider.
Wow. Okay. 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 So, Dr. Jeanette, if there's a Black woman right now, and she's watching right now, and she might be considering, you know what, I think I want to go into the mental health field. What words of wisdom would you? It might be clinical psych, it might be social work, it might be licensed professional counselor, it might be anything in the mental health field. What words of wisdom would you offer to her?
Know that you're called, because there will be plenty of times along your journey where you will have to go back to your why,
Hmm.
and your why will sustain you. You cannot do it alone. You need community.
Mm-hmm.
Mentorship is vital.
Mm-hmm.
You need good mentors,
Mm-hmm.
um, and prepare your family, because the journey requires so much of them as well. Because there will be ways that you will not be able to show up like you are used to prior to becoming a student. And just know that we need you. We need you. And if we can do it, you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And go in with a radical commitment to your own self care, because
Mm-hmm.
our process is brutal. It's
Mm-hmm.
brutal. And a lot of people develop autoimmune diseases and endocrine conditions and things like that along the process because of high level of stress. It
Mm-hmm.
takes to complete the process. But I would say just know that you are worthy of rest despite the workaholic culture of our professions and the training, and to make sure that you are plugged in with a good therapist and mental health professional yourself, because you will need it as support. You will need it to unload, um, without professional and ethical breaches, of your clients, or, privacy. And your family members may or may not understand your journey and all that you carry as a mental health professional who's Black in
Mm-hmm.
certain spaces. And so a lot of times you might need some professional support for where your family or your church is unable to support you.
Yeah, and the part about therapy is essential if you are going in the mental health field, that you are also in therapy. So you need to experience what it's like. If you are going to be a therapist, you need to know what it's like to be on the other side. Okay. And it's a very trying experience. So you need to have that additional support. Now, I want to ask you one last question before I read the community chat. So, what about Black women who are not going to the mental health field, but in terms of them evaluating the hidden costs of their job? What words of wisdom can you offer to them? How would they go about evaluating the hidden costs of their job?
I would say, I think one of the realizations that I had to have pretty early on, and it was very painful, but um, we can spiritualize and sterilize purpose and pursuit of calling, and make it this deeply beautiful spiritual journey. And with that comes, like, are you being steadfast? Are you being patient? But there's parts of it that just absolutely are just horrible.
Mhm.
And so just knowing and giving some real thought about how things, certain contexts and jobs are making you feel. Purpose is supposed to expand us, but exploitation narrows our life. It's draining, it's life sucking.
Ooh.
So when it becomes that type of sacrifice, even though you're doing the work you feel called to do, if you feel like you are dying
Mm.
or shriveling up on the inside, you might be in purpose in the wrong place. You might be in purpose with the wrong people.
Mm.
And so being open to fully understanding the different components of walking in purpose and calling. like we can have absolute clarity about what we're supposed to be, where we're supposed to be, the work we're supposed to be doing, but the how, the when, to whom, the where, all of those also matter. And so just noticing those things. I don't believe that we should die for calling. And that's, and I know I'm from seminary and Christian background, so I know some people are martyrs and for faith and things like that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about dying because your vulnerability, because of your commitment to your purpose, is
Mhm.
weaponized in certain systems to exploit you.
Right. Exactly. Right. And I think that this is the part where we get confused is that we're so mission driven sometimes about the work that we do because we feel like that's our calling and we feel like this is the only place where I can do this and this is my calling. And this took me a long time to realize this is that it may be my calling, but not at this place. It's not my calling at a place that is harming me because I cannot do this work here because I'm not at my best here, number one. Number two, number two, I don't think that God will want me to be any place where people are trying to destroy me. I don't think so. And number three, I can do this work at a much higher level somewhere else. I can do that, right? And so wherever we're working, sometimes we make that association that that is the only place where we can do that calling or that life's mission. That is not true. There are other places. And so it's important for us to lean in and think about that. What gives us the impression, or why do we have that association? Many times it's because we've associated part of our identity with the job for some reason, or we have an inaccurate belief that that is the only place where we can fulfill our calling, and that is not true. That is an irrational thought. And so we need to be able to challenge that. And the other thing, too, Dr. Jeanette, when you talk about being a martyr, I just feel like, and I don't know, because I didn't go to seminary, but correct me if I'm wrong. I cannot imagine that God would want us to sacrifice our physical, mental well being for a toxic job that's harming us. I,
I think this, and we, this is probably part two. This is actually what I studied in seminary. This was my dissertation, how to suffer well.
mm,
And I slightly disagree because I suffered and I was absolutely at the grad institution I was supposed to be in. I was absolutely studying what I was supposed to study, and I suffered. And in many ways, and some of that was me um, having difficulty navigating the space and lacking some discernment in some areas. And some of it was preparation and it was some character development. And it's just a very dicey subject because this is where people's own spiritual journey and spirituality and their own understanding of what they're called to
mm,
is very important, right? But
mm.
Jesus suffered. Jesus was murdered for purpose.
Right, right, right.
So the question, and so did Paul, just so did so many other people in our faith, right? But
Mhm,
my person on the heels of Martin Luther King Jr., Martin Luther King's birthday,
mhm.
he's a classic example. He was I'm an avid study of Martin Luther King Jr. He absolutely died for purpose. Now, did he want to die? Right? I mean, the Garden of Gethsemane scene, a verse in the Bible where Jesus was like, if this cup can pass, Lord, let it pass. But nevertheless, your will, not my own, right? And so I think this concept of suffering is worth more conversation around because some suffering builds character. Because if you haven't been through anything, right, then how can you have how do you develop grit?
Mhm.
Right? But I think the concept of suffering due to exploitation and lack of boundaries, lack of self advocacy, being silenced, spiritual bypassing, that's something different, right?
Got it.
I think understanding why we're suffering and what's the mechanisms of the suffering,
Mm-hmm.
and,
Mm-hmm.
and you know what I mean, and where God is in that suffering, because there were aspects of my suffering that God has absolutely shown me. It was he used it. He didn't waste it. Okay. Now, if I would have read the syllabus before that journey, I would have chosen not. I would have been like, Lord, I don't want to take this class, right?
Mm-hmm.
God doesn't tell us everything, because a lot of things he has for us, we would just try to decline. But I just think suffering is complex.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if Martin Luther King and some people, some of the Black Panthers, some of the people who suffer for human rights, Nelson Mandela, incarcerated wrongfully, like God used that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now it's like it's hard to have a conversation about suffering without talking about evil.
Ooh. Okay. Okay. Look. Okay. You tapping into something. We do need to have a part two, right? Because yeah, you're bringing up a lot of different complexities, and then the part you talk about exploitation and evil. We gonna have to have a follow-up conversation on this because this is gonna be really good.
But I
Yes.
think what you're mentioning about, I think what you're talking about is when
Hmm.
good people are being exploited because of systemic sin.
True. True.
Because of
True.
systemic sin and systemic victimization of employees. That's
Hmm.
something different. And that to me is a systemic evil.
Yes. 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 So in that case, Dr. Jeanette, would you say that Black women, and what would you say in relation to Black women is suffering in those situations?
Which one? The systemic evil?
Uh-huh. Yes.
You deserve better.
Okay.
We need you to live and not
Mhm. Mhm.
fulfill your purpose in the earth. God provides a way of escape.
Mhm.
I mean, we can go on and on. Get out. Get
Point
out.
blank. Get out. Get
Hey,
out.
don't get out. Get out with a plan. Get out with
Yeah,
a plan.
exit plan. Exit plan. Get your exit plan. Yes.
Get out with a plan, and,
Yes.
and know that God is something, that He loves you,
Mhm.
and God has something for you,
Yeah.
and He is for your good.
Yes. 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 So well stated. So well stated. So I'm gonna read the community chat and I'm gonna start winding down. Hello, Cynthia. Good to see you. Let's learn to grow and create together. Create together, sisters. Yes. Give thanks. God is good. Yes, yes, yes. Yes to knowledge. Give thanks to you, queens, lifting as you climb. Oh, looking out for other Black women in your field and helping to prioritize Black women's mental health to keep yourself alive while healing others. Oh, thank you. So sad but true. Thank you for doing this. Absolutely correct. Hello, my friend Colette Elizabeth. Good to see you back. Let's see. Lodge. Let's see. Okay, they're sort of asked if you had supports. You said you did have supports. Okay. Oh my goodness. Interesting point of view. Never thought about it like that. Hey, Tonya. Sometimes the people with less education can see and don't say anything because they feel educated people won't value what they have to say.
That's a good
Hmm.
point. We may need to address that. That's a good point.
What, you can share some thoughts about that. Hmm.
I do think that we have a responsibility with education to see it as something for our community, and that's why I think this is such a good conversation, because when it's calling, it's not about individualistic status. Like, calling is a spiritual journey in
Hmm.
service of humankind. And
Hmm.
with that comes humility and stewardship and love of God's, of humanity. And
Hmm.
so when we have people with all these degrees, and to look down on people, and to um, perpetuate classism, and all of that, these isms, I think that is something different. and I don't feel called to that, but I do agree that that is a very real dynamic, and I'm glad that Tonya like brought that up. Uh,
Yeah.
and I think that we have people who are more educated have a responsibility to break down those barriers and to be
Mhm.
inclusive in our
Mhm.
communities and in our families. And I'm so glad she brought that up, and that's why this space is so important.
True, true, true. And we have to recognize all the ways that there's different ways to divide us as a people. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, so education is a way, hopefully, to all uplift one another, that we're sharing information, we're using things to uplift each other, but we're not using it to look down on one another. Okay. Okay. I'm thankful that you found your path, the healing, Dr. King. Yeah. So they are saying your story was very sad. Absolutely. So again, I have Dr. King's information in the chat and description section of this video. Very true. We used to have that type of healing as well, incorporated with mystics training in metaphysical science, Dr. King. Let's see. The cost of your job may be hidden to us, but our loved ones, friends, and others can define the cost for us because they're experiencing it right along with us. So true, Carla.
Exactly.
So true. Dr. Kamani, I love what you said, that it may be your calling, but not at a certain place. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. That's right. Get out and shake the very dust off your feet. Matt, she gave
And
it a chord. That's right. That's right, Elizabeth. In fact, I'm going to shut down the screen right now. Absolutely, absolutely. Okay. So, Dr. King, I'm going to give you the last word before we end for today.
all right. I am absolutely privileged to be able to sit in hard spaces with people, particularly people of color who may not have access or have previous experiences with empathic, um, highly trained professionals in certain contexts. And so it's such a privilege, but it came with a great cost. And I am so grateful to you, Dr. Kamani, for giving voice to the cost. Because there's a lot of colleagues that I have, and we don't have safe spaces to talk about how much we gave up, how much our family sacrificed, like Carla said. Um, and it's hard. It's hard, and there's a lot of shame and a lot of secrecy around it. And so, for anyone that is entering a field, particularly psychology, mental health, any type of terminal degree, I just want to let you know that you are not alone. And I am so glad spaces like this exist so that we know that yes, calling can come with a cost. And it could be a blessing, but there could be aspects of it that are just downright just horrific. And so you're not the only one. I'm not the only one. We won't be the last. And so we have to keep lifting as we climb.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. And we always have to always think about our self-preservation. So there were two last questions that came in, and then for real, we're going to wind down. So another question from one of our channel members, Alicia. Dr. Jeanette, do you think that God is for you through suffering?
I think that God is always for me, but I think that suffering is part of the human experience. And I think that I'm not quite sure if you can follow up with that in the chat and help me understand because I want to make sure I'm answering your question. But I think you're asking, does God want me to suffer? Is that how you're hearing that, Dr. Kamani?
I'm not quite sure. Can you elaborate on that? Can you do a follow-up clarifying question, Alicia, in the chat, please? Um,
But I can go on to to say, what I think she's asking.
mhm.
I don't think that God is for suffering. I think evil is something very real in our world. And I think also as humans, we have choice as well. Some of the suffering that I have experienced was part of my choice, a consequence of some of my choices, whether they were known choices or not, informed choices or not. I'm learning how to be a human being. I'm going to continue to learn how to be a human being as long as I'm on the earth. But I don't think that God is the source of my suffering, if that's what you're asking. But I do think that suffering is part of being human. And I just happen to be a Christian, but I'm also human. And I think suffering is inescapable for human beings.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And then next question: what is the role of friendship, sisterhood on the journey to fulfilling our divine purpose?
Okay, so this is one of my best friends asking this question. Hi, Jennifer, sister circle. So, like, just her being on this call is like just huge in terms of the role of friendship and sisterhood. I would not have been able to do this without my sisters. I would not have
Mm,
been able to do it. I would not.
mm,
I think there is a camaraderie between women, healthy women,
mm,
that is unparalleled. And while we have some of us have so many wonderful men in our lives, I think the perspective of having another sister that looks like you is invaluable. And there was a group of us at Fuller. There's about seven of us, and I was a class underneath them, but the ones that were above us, they kind of adopted me, but it was a historic year where they never had that many Black people graduate from Fuller at one time to school psychology.
excellent.
And so we were all like a force that like supported one another. We came to each other's dissertations and
Mm,
like maybe we were studying for this EPPP, people sent care packages and things like that. So the role of friendship and sisterhood on this journey to divine purpose is absolutely critical. We need one another. And as iron sharpens iron, so does the countenance of a friend. And so I think that purpose and calling requires community. And there's nothing better than sisterhood.
I agree. I completely agree. I completely agree. So, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much, Dr. Denette King, for being my guest. And I'm so honored that we met. We both in LA, never met each other before, but I'm so glad that we met and we are connected. You're going to see Dr. Denette King on my channel some more. Okay. So, we're going to have these conversations. And then the comment she wrote back to you: as a friend, I value so much. You help me fulfill mine, and good sisters are the mirrors we all need. Yes, but a doctor, you will never tell you that. Kudos, Dr. Jeanette. Oh, okay. So Alicia did a follow up. When you look back, do you see the advantages of suffering?
I do. I do. Um, for me, the suffering did a lot for me. It helps me understand the omnipresence of God, that I'm never alone. Because in every moment, an instance of suffering, I always felt God's presence. And so it deepened my faith in God. I remember one time I could not pay a bill and I had to call my car creditor, and Grace answered the phone and transferred me to Mercy.
Wow.
And yeah, and so I have so many moments like that. And so I look back now at things that were unpleasant. And I think this is where my dissertation work and research helped. I don't like to go to the gym. I am angry. When I have a trainer, I am angry. I'm grumpy. I'm like, I don't want to do these crunches. I don't want to put no extra weights on this. Like, leave me alone. Let me do this mediocre workout. I know I'm paying you, but let me do, I don't care because I don't want the discomfort. But
Mhm.
there's so much on the other side of being strengthened.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And so I think the question is not about whether or not we should suffer. It's about, do we know how to suffer well?
And like you said, also without the systemic exploitation.
Yeah, that's different.
Yes.
That's evil. That's evil. But like just having a hardship of a day, and running into like life challenges, that's just life.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
comes with hardships. And my doctoral training came with some hardships because I chose to get a doctorate as a second career where I was already a mother of five. I mean, it wasn't the greatest timing, but that was on me because God called me 20 years later. And if I would have been obedient then, my doctoral process would have been a lot easier, I guarantee you.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that's me. So
Wow.
timing is important. That's the other thing I'll say to anyone. If God is calling you to do something, Do it now. Just don't wait, because he doesn't change his mind. When you're called, you're called. He's not going to change his mind. So
Mm,
go ahead and get it done. So you
mm,
won't be like me 20 years later and then struggling and suffering what I could have done it 20 years prior. And I would
mm,
have had a level of suffering, but it would have been a different suffering. And so some of that was a consequences of my choices, right?
mm,
So when you look back, do you see vital lessons in your suffering? Absolutely, Alicia, I do. And if you are suffering and if you're going through anything now, just know that God promises to work everything out for your good, because
mm,
he loves you and you're called according to his purpose. And the suffering that I have endured professionally, all of it has prepared me for this present moment.
mm,
All of it prepared me for this present moment. The person that introduced me to you, Dr. Kamani, in real life,
mhm.
the I she was one of those people at Fuller that when I was at my absolute worst and dealing with some systemic issues, they called her, and she was in a position at Fuller. They had no idea my personal relationship with her,
Ah,
which wasn't very well developed, actually,
uh-huh, uh-huh.
black women. But she stood up for what was right, and she protected me.
Mm, mm,
And when she did that, it shifted the trajectory of our relationship. I don't
mm,
know if that horrible season of my life would have, if we hadn't had that, I don't think I would have had the personal relationship I had with her that allowed
mhm.
me with you, that allowed me to be here today.
Amazing. Amazing. Amazing.
I
Yeah.
know, because I didn't have it before that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so there can be purpose in suffering, but
Mhm.
evil is just evil and it needs to be addressed as such.
Mm. And again, we're gonna have a follow-up conversation about this because I don't want confusion about this. Okay. So we'll have a follow-up conversation with Dr. Denette King. So just tune in to when we have this follow-up conversation. So everyone, again, thank you so much for watching. Give this video a thumbs up. Please share this video with at least 2 other Black women. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do so. It's absolutely free. Turn the notification bell so you know when I go live or when I upload another video. And I'm actually going live this Wednesday, and we're going to be talking about uh, what did we call it? Like post layoff
Oof.
trauma. So many Black women have been laid off during this time. And we're going to have a conversation about what is it like dealing with that trauma of being laid off. So we're going to have a conversation about that this Wednesday. So please tune in. That information will be on my YouTube channel. You'll see the time and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So that'll be this Wednesday. So I hope that you tune in then. And what else? I think that's it. Okay. So again, Dr. Denette King, thank you so much.
And then
And
come to my pages.
yeah, so check out all her information. They said excellent conversation. Thank you for your courage and transparency. I agree. So everyone, I will see you hopefully on Wednesday. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Have a good week.